In my last video, we learned the perfect ways not to start your English lesson. Instead, you want to begin your lesson in a way that is contextualized and student-centered with a lead-in. Yes, adult ESL learners do need practice with grammar and reading and other aspects of language. And of course, it's fine if you're using a course book or textbook for materials in your lessons. But as we saw in that last video, you don't need to jump into all of that in the first 5 seconds of your class. Adult ESL learners still need to be engaged in the topic. They need some time to warm up a bit, maybe get back into that English mindset if they haven't really used English since the last lesson, before you start diving into the main, potentially more technical activities in your lesson. So then, aside from just getting students to have maybe a brief conversation about the topic, whatever your context is in pairs, what else can you do to start your lesson in a way that's personalized and motivating for your students? And that is exactly what I'm about to tell you in this video. I'm going to share 5 of my favorite student-centered, fun, and motivating lead-in activity ideas with you. And just a quick note before we jump in, if you missed my previous video, it's all about lead-ins and what makes an effective lead-in in general. So why you even need one in the first place, how long it should be, what it should and shouldn't include. All of those fundamentals about lead-ins are in that video, so that's a great place to start. So if you haven't watched it yet, it's here. Go and watch that video first, and then once you've done that, come back here and continue on with this one. All right, so if you're ready, here are 5 lead-in ideas to get your lesson off and running in the best possible way. Idea number 1 is a story or anecdote. Now, this should be a brief story or anecdote that you tell. Remember, you want to keep your lead-ins ideally to about 5 minutes or less, so it needs to be quick. And the story should be somehow related to your context or the overall topic of your lesson. So you don't want to tell some totally random story and then completely shift gears into some other context for the rest of your lesson. The story, of course, should set your context and be related to what students are going to do or going to talk about throughout that lesson. For example, I have a lesson that I sometimes teach to upper intermediate students on second and third conditionals, and the context is unexpected or unfortunate or stressful travel stories. So for example, things like, if I had missed my train, I would have been in trouble. Or if I had more money in my budget, I wouldn't have to sleep in dodgy hostels, or things like that. So to begin that lesson, I start by telling a quick, like 1 to 2 minute tops story about a time when I was traveling in London and got hopelessly lost on my way to the train station and almost missed my train. So then from there, once you've told your demo story, you can put your students in pairs, in a physical classroom or in breakout rooms, and ask them to talk about a stressful or unexpected or close call kind of travel experience of their own. So telling the students my story first has a couple of different benefits. First of all, in listening to my short anecdote, students are exposed to some potentially helpful ideas and vocabulary that could help them with then telling their own story in that next part of the lead-in. And they also get a chance to listen to English for a minute, again, to kind of get back into that English zone and warm up a little bit before they have to jump right in and start speaking. And it helps me build some rapport with my students by allowing me to share a little bit about myself and my own experience, lets the students get to know me better. And then finally, and most importantly, my brief story serves as a demo of the same task that I then want my students to do. So now they have a super clear example of exactly what kind of thing to talk about with their partner, how long it should be, what kind of story it should be, what they should include. And instead of needing to give a bunch of detailed instructions about all of those things, all I really have to do is follow up and say, now tell your partner about a stressful travel experience or a close call that you had. That should suffice because they're going to understand that what they're supposed to do is exactly what they just saw me do. Idea number 2 is to use a picture. Show students a picture and ask them to make predictions or observations about it. And again, this picture should somehow be related to your context or related to whatever students are going to do next in the lesson. If you're teaching a listening lesson, say, maybe you show a picture of the context, whatever the situation is in the listening, 2 people talking to each other, having an argument, whatever it is that seems like it could be the people from the audio, show students that picture and have them make predictions or observations about it. Again, this is before they've listened to the audio, so you haven't even mentioned they're going to listen to anything yet. They're just looking at the picture talking about it first, and then as you can see, that's going to lead in quite nicely to now listen to the people in this picture having a conversation and see if your predictions or observations were accurate. Another example, I could show this picture and say, this is Sam, for example. How do you think he feels right now? What do you think he's doing on his computer? Why do you think that? So all I'm doing here is letting students throw out some guesses, and I'm going to avoid confirming them until I'm ready to move on to the next stage. And now, again, we're going to assume that the next stage of my lesson has something to do with Sam or using a computer or doing whatever, Sam is actually doing on the computer, whatever I've decided that that is. The great thing about using a stock photo like this is that the answer to what he's actually doing could be whatever I want it or need it to be to fit with the context or the next stage of my lesson. Am I teaching a vocabulary lesson about words related to finding a job? Then maybe Sam here is stressed about applying for jobs online. Is the context of my lesson all about family? Maybe he's waiting for his grandmother to sign on to Zoom and have a chat with him, right? Make it work for you so the picture can be whatever you want it to be. The idea is you get students engaged, guessing, talking about it, and now they're going to be motivated to go into the next stage and find out what's actually happening there. Idea number 3 is to use a ranking task. So, for example, there's a reading lesson that I teach to intermediate students, and the article that they read is all about fun, local things to do in Washington, D.C. So for the lead-in, I write 5 different things on the board that people might do when visiting a new city. For example, visit the famous sites, try the local food, go to museums, take pictures of interesting things, or go shopping. I then ask the students to rank these activities from 1 to 5, so put them in order, based on what they most like to do when visiting a new city, down to what they least like to do. And of course, everybody is probably going to have different opinions and different rankings. That's the whole point. I follow up by letting the students then talk in pairs to compare how similar or different their rankings are. And then I ask a few pairs for feedback, how their choices differed, right? Did you have the same number 1 as your partner? What was your opinion compared to your partner's opinion? Notice again that none of these 5 things are necessarily specifically about Washington, D.C. yet. I don't need to say anything about Washington, D.C. yet because that's what we'll get into when the students read the actual article in that lesson. It's just things that people could do when visiting a new city to kind of set the general context of what we'll be doing next, which is talking about fun things to do in this specific city. So we're not giving away anything that's going to be read about in the article that's coming in the next stage, right, that the whole lesson is built around. We're just setting the general context, which is going to make it easier to then lead into an article that happens to be about things to do in a specific city. Idea number 4 is a quote or a question. So what you could do is find a quote that somehow, again, fits the topic of your lesson and that you think will generate some interesting discussion. For example, maybe this one. Travel is never a matter of money, but of courage. Write that quote on the board or put it on a slide that you screen share and have students talk about it for a few minutes in pairs. They can discuss what they think it means. They could talk about possible interpretations. They could talk about whether they agree or disagree with it. There's not any right or wrong answer here. The point is just to get students thinking and talking. And again, that quote should then lead into whatever your lesson is about overall. Similarly, you could write an opinion kind of question on the board, like, do you need a lot of money to travel? Why or why not? And in pairs, let students debate about the answer. And idea number 5 is 2 truths and a lie. So if you haven't heard of this game or played this game before, it basically involves coming up with 3 different sentences or facts about yourself, but make sure that 2 of them are true and 1 of them is false. So if you'd like to do this even as an icebreaker, maybe in one of your first lessons with a new group of students, you could again put 3 sentences about yourself on the board, 2 true, 1 false, and then have students talk in pairs to guess which sentence they think is a lie. And a tip here is if you want to use this same lead-in exercise for, say, a grammar lesson, you could use that grammar in your 3 sentences. So maybe I'm teaching a lesson on the present perfect. I could write my 2 truths and a lie using the present perfect. For example, these sentences. I've never seen the Star Wars films. I've lived in this city for 5 years. I've visited 10 countries. As long as 2 are true and 1 is false, get the students talking. Of course, if you haven't taught the present perfect yet, they may not be using the present perfect perfectly as they're talking in their pairs. They may have some questions about what that grammar means, and that's fine. No need to get into it in the lead-in because that's what you're about to teach going forward in the lesson. But right now, you're just generating interest and you're putting some examples on the board that students are observing, even if they're not directly analyzing the grammar in those examples. They're getting exposed to the language that you're about to teach in a way that's more light and fun and motivating. And from there, you can lead into the grammar after that. So for this activity, regardless of what kind of grammar is in the 3 sentences, or if it's just an icebreaker, once the students have had the chance to make their guesses in pairs, ask the class to vote on which statement they think is the lie, and then of course confirm whether or not they're correct. You can then let the students play their round of this game in pairs, get them to write out their 3 sentences, 2 which are true, 1 which is false, about themselves, and then have them play the same game in pairs, tell them to guess which one of their partner's sentences is false. And just another note here, if you are using this activity to lead into a grammar lesson, like that example I gave you about the present perfect, when it comes to the student's turn to play, you won't want to make the students use that specific grammar point in their version because you haven't taught it yet. So just let them use whatever language they want and save the grammar for the next stage where you can go back to your examples that have the grammar in them and start analyzing from there. If you're using this lead-in activity, you can finish it out by asking students who was able to guess their partner's lie and what they learned about each other. All right, I hope you found this helpful. Comment below and let me know which lead-in activity idea was your favorite and which one you're looking forward to trying in one of your next lessons. And if you're looking for more practical, fun activity ideas and ways to adapt activity ideas like this for all different kinds of grammar or different kinds of lessons, I've left the link for you in the notes below this video, so go ahead and check it out.